So the whole right-wing meritocracy thing, right, where they're trying to get rid of DEI um, all over academia and in these elite schools, it's all premised on this idea that, when you have affirmative action, you don't have a meritocracy, as if throughout all of the decades that these schools existed, they ever had a meritocracy. I mean, if you genuinely believe that from the 1630s, when Harvard University was created, all the way through like the 1940s and 50s, when you had one or two blacks in there. I mean, I think in 1847 they let their first black person in, one guy. In 1870s they let their second black person in. And you mean to tell me that from all the way through that, because the 1840s you still had slavery, right? So you had very few black people who could even read, right? So the one black guy who gets into Harvard has got to be just extraordinary, right? And as a matter of fact, the first black Harvard graduate who graduated in the 1870s, like literally spoke fluent Greek and Latin and taught it and wound up like running Howard University, right? So the blacks who came into those schools at that time had to be outstanding and extraordinary. W.B. Du Bois got his PhD from Harvard. Like, he was a genius. Dr. King, yeah, he could enter Harvard University because he was brilliant. But the regular people who went there, let's just be clear. Harvard was a school that kind of branched off of people who had gone to Cambridge in Great Britain, right? That sort of storied university. It was a school that was populated by the sons, only sons, of the super rich, of the elite. The white scions of the great families that went there, of the rich families in the United States, those young men weren't going to Harvard because they were brilliant. They weren't going because it was a meritocracy. They were going because they were the scions of the rich. They were the sons of the rich families, okay? Harvard, Yale, Princeton, these were the schools designated for the sons of the well-born. Regular working class white students didn't get to go there. They were lucky if they ever went to college at all. Very few people, white and black, ever went to college at that time. And so if you were going to college, you were part of the elite. It wasn't a meritocracy. Some brilliant young white kid from, Podunk, Arkansas couldn't get into Harvard because they weren't from the right families. And going to Harvard and these elite schools was all about legacy. It was all about your family lineage. It wasn't about your brilliance. So if you honestly think that there was some sort of meritocracy where only the smartest and brightest were going there, and that's why it was all white men because they were the smartest and the bright, bullshit. Because the one or two off blacks who got in matriculated from enslavement or damn near it to Harvard because they were brilliant, because they were outstanding on like some next level, and there would be one of them in there. But the vast majority of their fellow students were just from the rich. Even when I went there, and I went there in the late 80s early and graduated in 1991, a lot of the people who were there were just legacy students. They weren't there because they were super geniuses. They were there because they were from the right families. In some cases, at least in one case, their family's name was on the building. So the idea that when it was all white men, it was a pure meritocracy, and the blacks ruined it by stinking it up with affirmative action, is the biggest crock of shit that you could possibly be sold. And if you believe it, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. It's called the Brooklyn Bridge. It can be yours for a mere, pass me $980,000. It's yours. Come on now. Put it in my Nigerian bank account because you a sucker. There was never a meritocracy. The super rich sent their sons to Harvard and Yale and Princeton and those schools. That's how it worked. Do you think George W. Bush was a genius? George W. Bush went to Yale because he was a Bush. John F. Kennedy, who was like a C student, if that, went to Harvard because his daddy was rich. That's not a meritocracy, guys. That's white men benefiting from being rich white men. Because even poor white men weren't benefiting in that system, and definitely women weren't. And so when they finally had to start allowing, Radcliffe to matriculate students in, I was one of the Radcliffe students that was in Harvard, but they didn't used to let the girls' school students, the Radcliffe students call themselves Harvard graduates. When they started doing that stuff and letting blacks in and stuff, you had to be like a brilliant black to get in. They weren't just scooping up black people out the hood. You had to be like super smart because they weren't letting a lot of us in. So it's the opposite of what you think. There never was a meritocracy at all in this country ever. There was just a system where only white men who came from the right families could have anything. And some people who probably wouldn't have even fit in to that elite back in the 19th century feel like if they could just get it back to only being white men, suddenly it would be a meritocracy. Because in their minds, only white men deserve to have anything. And they're mad and envious and jealous that brilliant black and brown and Asian people are in the spots they think belong to them. And sometimes they can't get into the schools they want, and these people do. And if you think for one hot second that they give a damn about Asian people and that they're fighting for them, wait till Harvard is majority Asian. Wait till Princeton and Yale or MIT, let one of those schools become majority Asian and watch the shenanigans unfold. Because the second Asians were a majority of the students at these elite schools, they will turn their fire on them because they're using them against us. So everybody, don't be fooled, don't be tricked, don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe. The meritocracy thing is a bullshit argument. It always has been. Love and peace.